Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're continuing our SEC football predictions today, and our next team is coming off back-to-back 7-6 seasons, but returned 15 starters and are looking to break that trend. They are the Kentucky Wildcats. Mark Stoops is entering his 6th year as head coach of the Wildcats. In the past 2 years, he's gotten them to a bowl game, but they lost both of them. So they've finished 7-6 the past 2 years. Now they're hoping to get back to a bowl game and actually win one, and they certainly have the team to do it. They return 15 starters, 7 on offense and 8 on defense, and the defense will certainly be the strength of this Wildcats team. They have Mike Edwards, the senior leader in the secondary, led by 3 seniors total. They also have Phil Hoskins along the defensive line, and so that's going to be the strength of this Kentucky team. Plenty of NFL caliber type players on that defensive side of the ball. And on offense, of course, the big name that we all know is Benny Snell at running back. He is going to be the leader of this offensive side of the ball. They also bring in Terry Wilson, the number 1 junior college quarterback from last year. He's a dual threat quarterback, so that's really going to help Kentucky. Last year after the departure of Steven Johnson, who I actually really enjoyed watching and was very high on, more of a dual threat quarterback himself, and made too many mistakes. Hopefully Terry Wilson can come in there and do much better than him and get Kentucky back to at least a 6-6 mark to get back to a bowl game. So they open the season at Central Michigan, which shouldn't be an issue for Kentucky, but if you've watched Kentucky football during the Mark Stoops era, they usually struggle against a team they really shouldn't struggle to. Last year, it was Eastern Michigan, barely escaping at home with a 24-20 victory. They've had a couple of FCS teams give them scares as well. But this shouldn't be an issue for this Kentucky team. They should be able to stay at home and get a win over a decent Central Michigan team. And then they go on the road to Florida, led by Dan Mullen and 19 returning starters, and they have not beaten Florida in 31 straight games. Florida has beaten the Wildcats 31 straight times. It's unbelievable, and Kentucky was so close to doing it last year, losing in the final seconds, 28-27. And I was really high on Kentucky last year. I thought they were going to snap the streak to Florida and just couldn't get the job done. If this game had been in Lexington this year, I might pick Kentucky again, but it's in the swamp. Dan Mullen's going to have his team hyped. They're looking to extend that streak, and I'm going to say it's going to be 32 straight games that Kentucky loses to Florida this season. And then Murray State, another FCS opponent, a win there for Kentucky. And then a big stretch here in terms of their bowl hopes, Mississippi State, South Carolina, and on the road at Texas A&M. 2 of those luckily coming at home for Kentucky, but they're all against tough teams. We'll start with Mississippi State, bringing Joe Moorhead and 17 returning starters, including one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC in Nick Fitzgerald. He's obviously going to have another big year here. Joe Moorhead being an offensive mind, he's going to be able to get that Mississippi State offense going, much like he did with much like they did with Dan Mullen. And the defensive side of the ball is one to not be overlooked, especially along that defensive line. If that defensive line can swallow up Benny Snell and really shut him down, they're going to have to rely on Terry Wilson, and only coming into his 4th game as a Wildcat and really only 1 game that's against a decent opponent. I don't know how he's going to be able to handle that, and I'm going to give them a loss at home to a solid Mississippi State team. And then they stay at home to face South Carolina, who Kentucky has owned these past 4 years. Have not lost to South Carolina in 4 straight years, so they've won a couple at home and a couple on the road as well. But this South Carolina team is different. Much different than what we've seen in the past. By far, Will Muschamp's best team he's had at South Carolina. Another solid quarterback in Jake Bentley. Solid running back, solid wide receivers, and a defense that returned 6 starters. So it might be a little weaker than Kentucky's, but still should be solid. It is at home, and I was so close to picking Kentucky in this game. But what sent me over the top was South Carolina's offense. I have a lot of faith in them, and obviously that revenge factor on their mind of, hey, we've lost 4 straight to these guys. We're not going to let it happen again. Let's go into their house and take one away from them. So I'm giving the edge to South Carolina in this one, but it wasn't easy. It's going to be a very close game, and it would not surprise me if Kentucky wins this game. But for right now, I'm going to give the edge to South Carolina. And then on the road at Texas A&M, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think they have met since Texas A&M joined the SEC back in 2012. So this is an intriguing matchup. It's at College Station. As we all know, Jimbo Fisher is now the head coach of the Aggies, and that's going to be a big boost for them in the long run. Not necessarily this year, but they do return 16 starters. A solid quarterback in Nick Starkel and a solid defensive line as well. So this is a team that could pull off a couple upsets in the SEC West, especially, and definitely get back to a bowl game. With it being on the road, College Station being a tough place to play, you got the 12th man. I'm not feeling a Kentucky win here, and a lot of these games are going to really rely. I have a lot of faith in their defense. It's going to rely on their offense and how quickly Terry Wilson can get adjusted and how well he can perform for the Wildcats. But a loss on the road to Texas A&M, so not a great start for Kentucky. They're going to be 2-4 going into their bye week, and it will clearly, if this is the case, be a much-needed bye week to fix any problems that they have and get prepared for the final stretch of the season, so to try to get back to bowl eligibility. They come back off the bye week against Vanderbilt, and that should be a good win for them. A much-needed win against a weaker Vanderbilt team. I like their quarterback in Kyle Shermer. I've liked Derek Mason, but they're coming off a bye week. They're rested, and I think Kentucky just overall has more talent on their team than Vanderbilt does for this season, and they're going to get a big-time win at home against Vanderbilt. Then back on the road against Missouri. A team that's going to have a very, very explosive offense, and the Kentucky defense is definitely going to get a big workout from this game. Missouri putting up 500 or more yards of offense last year 6 times. So a very potent offense that returns 9 starters to Maria Crockett, Drew Lock. It's on the road, so they're going to have the home side on their crowd, a home crowd on their side. It just doesn't point to a Kentucky win for this game for me. I just don't see this one turning out well for the Wildcats. I think that Missouri should win fairly handily. This game could stay close for about the half, but if Kentucky offense can get anything going in this game against what's going to be an improved Missouri defense, then I don't see them winning this one. A loss here on the road. And then Georgia comes to town. And if you remember, Kentucky hung with Georgia for about a quarter or two last year, and then Georgia really pulled away in that second half. Back down in Athens. So this year Georgia returns the favor, comes back to the Kentucky to Lexington, and this is going to be a game that once again I think could stay close for about the first half because this Georgia team's still going to be very talented, but a little weaker on the defensive side of the ball. However, I don't see them losing this game in Lexington. This is going to be a great game to watch. It's going to be because that Kentucky stadium is going to be just so exciting, so electric. It's going to be loud. You're going to bring probably a top 10 team into Lexington. That's going to be a huge deal. And like I said, with that crowd on their side, Kentucky could put up some points and give them a little bit of a scare, but in the end, I think Georgia, like last year, pulls away in another loss for Kentucky. Now, that puts them at 6 losses on the year and only 3 wins. They have to win all 3 games to even have a chance to get back to a bowl game for the 2018 season. But the schedule works out in their favor despite 2 of those games being on the road. You got Tennessee, was a total train wreck last year in Butch Jones' final season. They bring in Jeremy Pruitt, had a train wreck offseason, and just have so many questions on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Yes, they have Keller Christ at quarterback. Yes, they have some solid wide receivers. Yes, Jeremy Pruitt is a defensive-minded coach, and they have some good starters on that side of the ball. And they also have a game at home. But I don't have a lot of faith in this Tennessee team this year. Some people say they could be borderline bowl eligible. I'm not really sure yet. I haven't done my predictions on them, but I think Kentucky's going to be able to go on the road and steal a big-time win at Tennessee. This is not a super deep Tennessee team. This is not going to be a super good Tennessee team. Kentucky's going to know, hey, we have the talent to win. We just haven't been able to put it together yet, and we need to win all these games, and we want to have a chance to get back to a bowl game. I think they can do it. They get a win at Tennessee and then a win at home against Middle Tennessee to set up basically go big or go home game at rival Louisville. And this is going to be huge. Last time here, Kentucky beat Louisville. What was a big-time upset? They still had Lamar Jackson. It was at Louisville. No one really expected Kentucky to come in there. It was a shootout. I think it was 44-41 or 41-38. And they went in there and took care of business. And last year, Louisville did the exact same thing. Came in to Lexington and took care of business against Kentucky, annihilating them. This year, I think it flips again. I think Kentucky goes on the road and gets a big-time win at Louisville to get to 6-6 and make a bowl game. Yes, Louisville lost Lamar Jackson. They bring in Juwan Pass and some solid wide receivers such as Jalen Smith. But their defense is going to be an issue this year, only returning 4 starters. Bobby Petrino knows how to coach an offense, but even back in his days at Arkansas, his defenses were never necessarily dominant. So only 4 starters return on that side of the ball. I'm curious to see how they adjust to post-Lamar Jackson life. I do have a little bit of faith in Juwan Pass, though. But in the end, I think Kentucky gets a big-time win at Louisville. They're going to have plenty of fans there, and they know what they need to do to get to a bowl game. They know that this is it. If they lose, they don't. If they win, they get to go. And I think they're going to get a big-time win on the road at Louisville to get them to 6-6. Now, Kentucky certainly has plenty of talent, and like I said, a lot of this season is going to rely on Terry Wilson. I have plenty of faith in Benny Snell. I think their offensive line has all but one man returning, so he's going to have a solid offensive line to run behind, and then the defense. Mark Stoops, a defensive-minded coach anyways, brings plenty of good players back, 8 starters returning. They're going to be fairly solid in a much improved SEC East. But 6-6, maybe even 7-5 is not out of the question for the Wildcats. I can see them maybe winning against South Carolina there, maybe even beating Missouri on the road, something like that. But 6-6 for the Kentucky Wildcats gets them back to a bowl game. They could still have another third straight 7-6 record, but this time they would win the bowl game. So a solid campaign for Mark Stoops and the Kentucky Wildcats. As always, please go check us out on Twitter at Gridiron Expert with no the, just at Gridiron Expert, and also on Instagram at The Gridiron Expert, and always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.